This is the chilling tale of the Bagman, a sinister figure who lurks in the shadows, capturing only the purest and most innocent children, locking them away in his dark, mysterious bag. The story begins with a girl named Emily, who is with her father. They had come to the ground to play, and now that it's night, they are preparing to head home. Emily isn't in a good mood, so her father decides to cheer her up by buying her some food from a nearby shop. Emily stays near the car while her father goes to the shop. A lot of time passes, but her father doesn't return. Suddenly, the lights above Emily start flickering, scaring her. Panicked, she runs into the shop where her father went. She finds him lying on the floor, paralyzed. He gestures for her to leave the place immediately, but before she can react, a dark figure appears behind her, a demon known as Bagman. The demon kills Emily and stuffs her into his bag before disappearing. The story then jumps forward by 4 years. We are introduced to Patrick, an engineer. He lives with his wife and son. Patrick was once involved in major projects but was unfortunate in his ventures, leading to massive losses. Now bankrupt, he has been forced to sell his house. With no other option, Patrick moves back to his hometown with his family, where his family's timber business still operates. Patrick's parents have passed away, and his elder brother now runs the family business. Patrick wants to restart his career and presents a project idea to his brother, explaining that with proper funding, it could become highly profitable. However, his brother advises him to focus on their family business for the time being. Although the business isn't very big, Patrick has no interest in it, yet he realizes that he currently has no other option. Every night, Patrick hears strange noises that disturb him deeply. One such night, when the mysterious sounds echo again, he decides to follow them outside. As he ventures out, he spots a strange creature hiding behind the bushes. The sight of it terrifies him. Patrick has been carrying the burden of a childhood trauma that still haunts him to this day. When he was young, he once accompanied his elder brother to the abandoned Passy mines, a place permanently shut down by the government. Patrick has a unique talent for crafting wooden toys, a skill lovingly passed down by his father. At that time, he had carved an owl out of wood, which he always kept with him. As the brothers approached the mines, they noticed a plum tree had fallen nearby. Patrick, fascinated by the soft wood of the tree, wanted to use it to craft more toys. Ignoring his brother's warnings, he began cutting off a piece of the tree's wood. But suddenly, a ghastly hand emerged from within the mine, grabbed a lock of Patrick's hair, and tried to pull him in. Patrick fell to the ground in fear. He heard eerie sounds coming from the mine and realized that his wooden owl had slipped from his hand and was left behind. Terrified, Patrick abandoned the owl and ran back home. Once there, he narrated the entire incident to his father. Hearing this, his father took him to the peak of a nearby hill, from where the entrance of the mine was visible. Pointing to the mine, his father told him a spine-chilling truth. There is a demon inside that mine. Years ago, it killed every single person who worked there. This demon preys especially on children. Once it touches a child, it never lets go. Patrick tried to brush off his father's words, but his father grew stern and warned him, "From now on, you must never go near that mine." Though Patrick promised, the terrifying experience left a permanent mark on his mind. That night, his father visited him in his room and handed him a small knife. "As long as you have this knife," his father said, "believe in your imagination that no harm can come to you from that demon." Patrick clung to those words and followed his father's advice, finding a sliver of comfort in the small blade and his imagination. The story shifts back to the present, where Patrick's wife is working on her laptop while their son plays outside. Suddenly, she hears strange noises coming from the direction of the forest. Their son, curious, begins following the sound toward the woods. Realizing this, Patrick's wife runs after him, desperately trying to catch up. She manages to reach him just in time and brings him back home. That evening, when Patrick returns home, his wife tells him everything. "Our son kept walking deeper into the forest, following those strange sounds. If I hadn't reached him in time, we might have lost him," she says with a tremble in her voice. Patrick is deeply disturbed by what he hears. Later that night, Patrick receives an email informing him that his funding request for his project has been rejected. Frustrated and overwhelmed by his career failures, Patrick loses his temper. In a fit of rage, he slams the knife his father had given him as a child onto the table, breaking it. His frustration turns to unease when he notices something strange on the screen of his home security camera. It appears that there's someone or something in his son's room. Patrick rushes to the room, but there's no one there. Still, he feels an unsettling presence and hears a faint noise coming from outside. Grabbing a baseball bat for protection, he steps out into the night. The sound, eerily familiar, comes from the direction of the forest, the same haunting sound he had heard as a child near the abandoned mine, the night something had grabbed a lock of his hair. The next morning, Patrick calls the sheriff to investigate. The sheriff thoroughly searches the house and finds no signs of theft, but he does discover something unusual. Outside one of the windows, there are small wooden toys lying on the ground. The sheriff advises Patrick to cut down all the bushes and shrubs surrounding the house to eliminate any hiding spots. Patrick agrees to do so. Later that evening, while cleaning his room, Patrick stumbles upon the wooden owl he had carved as a child, the same one he had dropped outside the mine all those years ago. Shocked and confused, he asks his wife about it. She replies, "This is the first time I've ever seen this." The reappearance of the owl sends a chill down Patrick's spine, as if his childhood fears are creeping back into his life. Patrick had recently crafted a wooden flute for his son. However, his wife finds the sound of it annoying and tells him, "Please put it away. Its sound irritates me." Respecting her wishes, Patrick sets the flute aside. That night, while bathing his son in the bathtub, the boy innocently asks, "Can I have that flute?" Patrick heads downstairs to fetch it. But at that very moment, the sinister figure of the Bagman, who kidnaps children and traps them in his bag, appears in the bathroom, attempting to take Patrick's son. Patrick senses that something is wrong and rushes back upstairs, startling the Bagman and forcing him to flee. Though their son is safe, the incident leaves Patrick and his wife utterly terrified. Concerned for their child's safety, they decide to keep him with them in their room that night, unable to shake the fear that the Bagman might return. Patrick couldn't sleep that night. Restless, he stepped outside the house. He walked toward the garbage where he had thrown his son's flute earlier. But to his surprise, the flute was no longer there. Confused and uneasy, he returned to the house, only to find that the door was locked from the inside. He peered through a small window and froze in terror. Hanging upside down from the ceiling was the Bagman, holding the very same flute in his hand. Paralyzed with fear, Patrick smashed the glass window to break into the house. His wife, awakened by the noise, rushed to him. Although the Bagman had been inside their home, he hadn't harmed their family that night. The following morning, Patrick called the sheriff again. The sheriff carefully inspected the house but found no signs of theft. He suggested, "This might be the work of some disturbed individual. For years ago, we had a similar case. A man was left paralyzed, claiming a horrifying figure had captured his daughter in a bag and taken her away. I believe this might be connected to that case." Patrick, however, had a feeling he knew more than he was letting on. He decided to visit his older brother and showed him the wooden owl he had carved as a child, the one he had lost in the mine. While his brother found Patrick's story hard to believe, he advised him, "You should visit the psychiatrist who treated you as a child. He helped you back then, maybe he can help you now." Patrick decided to take his brother's advice. Meanwhile, Patrick's wife was shown taking their son to a park. While she worked on her laptop, her son played a short distance away. A few minutes later, the boy returned to her, holding a piece of paper. She unfolded it, and her heart sank. The paper contained a sketch of Patrick from the time he was standing outside the mine cutting wood as a child. Her instinct screamed danger. She looked around and spotted her son on a swing nearby, but standing next to him was the Bagman. He was just about to capture the boy in his bag when she dashed over and saved her son in the nick of time. Now, she was convinced her son's life was in grave danger. Someone, or something, was out to get him. The next day, she and Patrick went together to meet the psychiatrist who had helped Patrick during his childhood. To their relief, the psychiatrist took their story seriously. "The Bagman preys on pure souls," she explained. "He takes children who have the potential to achieve greatness in life. His powers are dark, and he can paralyze adults to prevent them from intervening. Patrick then revealed something that made sense of their current predicament. Since the day he had broken the knife his father had given him, his sense of security and protection had vanished. The psychiatrist confirmed this. The knife was not ordinary. It carried a kind of protection with it. Without it, the Bagman sees you and your family as vulnerable. She advised them, "For now, you must leave your house. Go stay in a hotel for a few days. It will give you time to regroup and think clearly." Understanding the seriousness of the situation, Patrick agreed. One night, Patrick and his wife had to leave the house for an important errand, so they left their son with Patrick's aunt. As the night progressed, the lights in the aunt's house suddenly went out. Realizing something was wrong, the aunt quickly went to check on Patrick's son. At that very moment, the Bagman appeared and attacked her, leaving her injured. When Patrick and his wife returned, they were shocked to see police cars and an ambulance outside the house. Terrified, they rushed inside, only to find that their son and the aunt were safe. The police reviewed the CCTV footage, but it provided no evidence. Strangely, the cameras had malfunctioned just before the incident, and when the security guard went upstairs to investigate, the Bagman escaped. Thankfully, Patrick's son's life was saved in the nick of time. The sheriff, now convinced that someone, or something, was targeting Patrick's family, advised them to return home. To ensure their safety, he stationed guards outside their house. However, late that night, as Patrick's son was in his room, the Bagman returned. This time, he managed to trap the boy in his bag and disappeared. Patrick witnessed the horrifying scene and immediately ran after the Bagman, following him deep into the woods. After a frantic chase, Patrick arrived at the very mine where, as a child, he had experienced the terrifying incident of someone cutting his hair from behind. From within the mine, Patrick could hear his son's cries for help. Without hesitation, he entered. Inside the mine, Patrick was greeted by an eerie, otherworldly sight. Dim lights flickered, and strange, old-fashioned toys were scattered around. Suddenly, he spotted the Bagman's sack. He could hear his son's voice coming from inside the bag. Desperate, Patrick opened the bag, but instead of his son, he found a lifeless dummy. It was all an illusion. The demon, the Bagman, had lured Patrick into his trap. The Bagman appeared, holding Patrick's son's flute. Its presence signified that the boy's fate was sealed. He was the next target. Patrick fought valiantly, trying to stop the demon, but the Bagman was no ordinary entity. He was beyond human strength or comprehension. In the end, the Bagman overpowered Patrick, breaking his bones and stuffing him into his bag. It was a chilling conclusion to what had begun in Patrick's childhood. The demon had finally succeeded in completing his dark mission. Meanwhile, back at home, Patrick's wife grew increasingly worried about her husband's disappearance. She realized the demon had taken him to the mine. With the police, she rushed to the location. But when they arrived, there was no sign of Patrick or the Bagman. What they did find, however, was their son's flute, lying abandoned. Patrick had once told her that the flute was the key to protecting their son. As long as the boy kept the flute with him, the Bagman couldn't harm him. Though she had previously doubted Patrick's beliefs, she now fully understood the danger they were in. Taking the flute, she returned home with her son. The next morning, she packed their belongings and decided to leave the house forever. During the journey, she handed the flute to her son and told him about the Bagman. She explained the importance of the flute and how it was his shield against the demon. She also passed on the same wisdom that Patrick's father had once shared with him, urging her son to always keep the flute close. As they drove away, a sense of hope lingered, even amidst the haunting memories. With her son by her side and the flute in his hand, she vowed to protect him from the darkness that had haunted their family. And with that, the story came to an end, leaving behind a chilling reminder of courage, love, and the power of belief.